Direct Connection is made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you. Live from Maryland Public Television, this is Direct Connection with Jeff Salkin.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for Direct Connection. Our focus tonight is the high-pressure world of a Maryland 911 call center. How is technology changing emergency communications, and what do you need to know before placing a call to 911? Joining us tonight are Eddie Hopkins, Harford County's Director of Emergency Services, and Rhonda Hinch, a veteran dispatcher for Harford County. Glad you could both join us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jeff, for having us. Appreciate it.
Eddie, how many calls do you get a year through 911?
In 2014, we had over 234,000 calls for service last year.
That's pretty busy. Rhonda, in the call center, what's it like? Is it constant? Are there periods where it gets...
Yeah, there are periods of busy time. Depends on the day of the week. If it's a holiday, weather has a lot to play with it. So there are busy times. There are slower times as well.
There's so many things I'm curious about with the operation of 911. I'm sure our viewers will have questions too. How many of the calls turn out to be like legitimate emergencies versus other stuff?
Well, it depends on how you define emergency, because really, truly, the people that are calling us, for them, that event is a critical event for them. So we define emergencies much, much differently because we're in the field. So probably less than 50 to 75,000 calls a year are truly legitimate emergencies where there might be life and death scenarios. The remainder are typically calls for service where people need our assistance for a variety of issues. And
you're building a new center? You have a new center?
Right. The new center was commissioned in November of 2014. We actually, this Wednesday, March 26th, we will take our 911 center completely over to the new center. That will provide all kinds of new technology and systems and operations to better serve the citizens of Harford County.
You know, technology was the thing that got us started thinking about doing a program on 911, because I've been wondering for a long time about whether or not to get rid of my landline at home and just rely on cell phones. The only calls that come into the home phone, I don't know about you guys, it's just spam. Right. But I've kept the landline thinking that, you know, you hope it's never necessary, but if you had to call 911, Rhonda, does it come up on the screen better when somebody comes in from a landline?
When you do call from a landline, we do get a lot more information. We get your exact location, the phone number you're calling from, the subscriber's name, closest fire department, and closest police department to them. Whereas when you call from a cellular number, we get your cell phone number, your subscriber, and your cell phone tower that picked up your signal. So we still have to verify your exact location. So we do get more information from a landline.
I mean, you read about the cell phones being able to determine through GPS a location down to a couple of yards. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of hit or miss?
It depends on the type of phone you have, what phase of cell phone you have. Sometimes we get better information than others, and sometimes it can pinpoint you a little bit closer than others.
Sometimes it can get you in the wrong county, though.
It can, and many times the cell phones will ping a tower that's in an adjacent jurisdiction, which can be confusing for a public safety dispatcher, and it forces him to ask the question, where's that caller coming from? Because the caller who may be in Harford County and assumes that they're calling to Harford County 911 may be pinging a tower in Baltimore County, and the dispatcher not realize it, which causes a delay in services.
What's the goal? If somebody calls in with a medical emergency, how fast can, if it's appropriate, you get a medic rolling?
Well, now we utilize rapid dispatch. So as soon as you call 911, we get your location and your phone number, and then we ask, tell me exactly what's happening. And with that information that you tell us, we start whichever fire, EMS, police that you need immediately within, I think the statistics are 34 seconds.
Right.
So help is started within 34 seconds.
So you don't wait for the call to end?
No, the call is dispatched before we're even done questioning the caller. So we keep the caller on the phone for an additional, minute or two, depending on the situation. We ask additional questions. We also give pre-arrival instructions. So we can give you CPR instructions, childbirth instructions. If you're having whatever your situation is, we give you instructions to help.
Have you ever had to do that?
Oh, all the time.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty much a daily occurrence.
Wow.
So.
And the key to that, too, is that the people who are calling have to understand that even though we're asking all these questions, fire, EMS, and police are already being dispatched and are en route. This additional information we're getting from these callers allows us then to update first responders with what critical event they're responding to. So we don't want to delay services. We'll get the units on the road right away, but there is additional units so that police and firefighters know what they're going to.
Let me remind our viewers, if you have a question about 911 emergency services, how to properly place a call, when it's appropriate, when it's not, give us a call. We have the number on the screen. You could also tweet a question. Our Twitter address is @MPTNews. So in that situation where somebody calls in, you're asking a lot of questions, if they don't know that the medic is already rolling, do they get frustrated? Like, stop asking me all these questions and send the truck?
They really do. And sometimes their agitation comes through on the phone, and then we have to spend several seconds trying to calm them down and reassuring them that services are en route, that what the information they can tell us is critical for us. But they do get agitated and sometimes very upset with us to the point where they forget why they're calling and become argumentative.
So what happens if the call does go to the wrong jurisdiction? Say you pick up and it's a cell caller who winds up in the Hartford 911 center, but the person's really in Baltimore County. It's got to slow it down. I don't know by how much.
We have a speed dial, so once we determine the location of the caller and where their emergency is, then it's a one-button transfer. So it doesn't take much time to send it to the other jurisdiction.
Okay, so when is it appropriate for somebody to call? And I'm sure you've gotten plenty of calls where, why are you calling me with this? We're not a taxi cab. When's it appropriate? When's it not?
Anything that's in progress, any medical emergency that you're having, any type of fire that's in progress, any police situation that's in progress. If it's a routine situation, especially for police emergencies where you're just following up on a case, that's not a need to call 911. You can use a business number to follow up on calls like that. But anything that's in progress is something you definitely need to use 911 for.
Yeah, you have people who abuse it, who just, call in for somebody to talk to or as a prank, and what can you do about it?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question. Let me answer it with two parts. One, we do have people that call in and abuse periodically, and most of these people have psychological or emotional issues. And once we've identified their location, we can dispatch law enforcement. And usually the underlying cause is a mental health or emotional issue where they don't know who else to call. The other part of that is there are spammers out there. And one of the challenges we're facing across the country is people that are calling on voice over IP lines, and they're calling through the internet, and they're fabricating stories to create disruption in the fire, EMS, and law enforcement services by sending us to homes where there are no emergencies. And this has happened quite frequently across Canada and throughout the United States, and becomes a challenge for us because we can't tell if a true emergency exists or not.
What's their motivation for doing that?
We think most of the times it's just punkiness, so to speak, for lack of a better metaphor. It's basically they got one over on us.
Yeah. Let's take a phone call. This is Howard in Washington County. Howard, thanks for the call. Go ahead.
Yes, I live in Washington County near the Pennsylvania line, and when I use my cell phone to call for an emergency, I get the Mercersburg Emergency Center, and they just tell me, oh, well, you're in Maryland. We can't help you. Are they supposed to transfer the call?
Wow, interesting. Thanks very much, Howard.
They should transfer the call. Unfortunately, the downside is consistency across the country as to how various states and jurisdictions operate. We have mutual aid agreements in Hartford County with our adjoining counties and states where we know to transfer the calls back and forth to the various 911 centers. I can't speak specifically for Mercersburg, but it should be an indication they should be transferring the call back down. They should not be forcing that caller to hang up and call 911 again.
Not necessarily a bad idea to program the county, maybe the non-emergency number into your cell phone.
Yes.
If it's something less, is there a phone number that goes straight to the 911? You may not want to tell me what it is, but if somebody, say it was a situation like that where they're repeatedly getting the wrong county and you wanted to call Hartford, is there a way to do it?
You can. Hartford County has a direct line, 410-638-4900, which takes you to a phone tree. Now, the phone tree is fairly rapid, and it will tell you immediately to hang up and call 911. But you can, if your situation isn't dire, you could actually go through the phone tree instructions and be directed to services.
You're here to speak for Harford County, but you have experience statewide. Across the state, is everybody set up? Is it sort of similar in terms of technical capabilities, staffing, and all that?
It varies county to county, but the way the centers typically operate, yes, they're very similar in their methods of operation. But the technology varies from county to county because some counties may not be able to have certain technology because of cost and budget restrictions, and other counties may have more. Certainly, volume of calls vary from state to state, as do mutual aid agreements.
Let's go out to Anne Arundel County. This is Chuck. Chuck, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Yes, I had a two-part question. The
Yes,
first
sir.
is, does your new 911 center have the ability to receive video feeds from cell phones? And secondly, would there be any value in having something like a GETS number that could give priority service to neighborhood watch program participants?
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Our current center, we do have the capability for video feeds, but not cell phone video feeds yet. We are working that direction. We do have the ability to bring in like closed circuit feeds and, of course, state highways and MDOT feeds. But we don't have what he's asking for yet, but we are working that direction. GETS cards basically the GETS cards are assigned to us by the Maryland Emergency Management Agency, so they're typically restricted for senior level county executive officials and decision-making officials. I'm not certain if a local community watch group could get a GETS card. What he's referring by a GETS card is GETS card allows the caller for priority access. In other words, if you and I are on a phone trying to make a call at the same time during a disaster, I have a GETS card and you don't. The GETS card code number gives me priority over your call. I bump you out of the rotation.
Are we talking about cellular capability?
Cellular capabilities and landline capabilities.
Bandwidth?
Both. Right. No. Actually, just timing in the call. So if you and I are vying for the same spot for a cell signal, if I have a wireless priority access code, I'm going to get that spot when that call space becomes available over you. And typically, it's used in disaster situations like during the earthquake several years ago when all the phone lines were flooded, no one could get a line out except those who had wireless cards and GETS cards.
Now, I've also heard that in situations like that, it's sometimes easier to get a text message out than a call, which leads me to texting to 911, which is in its earliest stages. How do you guys think about that?
It's such new technology. I'm not sure how it would work. I know there are some centers who are testing it and trying it out right now. It would be interesting to see how it works. I just hope that it wouldn't be abused by the public, since we, wouldn't have them to actually talk to. And it might be a little more difficult to hear background noises to gauge, a situation, or to hear a caller's tone. But it would also help people who are maybe deaf or hard of hearing.
And the other two is with language, because everyone texts, as you know, there's a texting language, and there would have to be consistency so we understand what the true emergency is. Currently, I don't know of any centers in the state that monitor Facebook or texting for emergency calls for service. Matter of fact, they've been discouraging people, because unless you monitor your Facebook absolutely 24/7, it's entirely possible that you'll miss an emergent call from someone who only uses Facebook.
Right.
So there's very few centers. I don't think actually there's any centers that I'm aware of that does that full time.
Here's an interesting tweet. Someone was told by Baltimore County Police to use 911 for police non-emergency crime reports, as that is the only way police track crime data. So is there anything to that? I mean,
No, if your tweeter is referring to the uniform crime statistics, those numbers are captured when the police officer completes his report, and then they're submitted to the FBI quarterly from the local police department. Calling 911 it generates a 911 statistic, but not necessarily a crime statistic.
Rhonda, what happens when one of those situations where everybody's on the phone at once? Say there's a big accident on 95. Sure, this has happened a lot. And it used to be maybe you'd get a call or two before cell phones. Now, with cell phones, everybody on the highway decides that they're going to call 911, so you get 100 people. How many people are on duty at one time, and what happens when you have a surge like that?
Well, at Harford County, we have 10 people working at any given time. That's our minimum staffing. When all the 911 lines are being answered and all the call takers are busy, they ring down to the radio positions, and so other people will answer the phones. You'll never get a busy signal in Harford County, but you may get a recording that say all operators are busy, please stand by. So we want people to stay on that phone and just wait for a few seconds to be answered, because once you drop off and redial 911, you're now dropping to the bottom of the queue. So if you just stay on the phone, your call will be answered shortly.
I wanted to come back to your training a little bit. You talked about having had the opportunity to help people deliver babies and that sort of thing. How is everybody in the center trained to do that?
Well, we have national training that we use medical priority dispatching. So when somebody calls 911, everybody is treated equally and fairly on the phone. They're all asked a standard set of questions and given a standard set of responses and assistance based on what the emergency is. But every caller gets the same treatment, whether you're a doctor calling, a firefighter calling in, or a general public. You're still going to get the same questions, and then we're going to give you instructions.
Talk about the stress a little bit. How long have you been doing this for?
I've been doing it 26 years. It can be stressful, but it's also pretty rewarding. It's a great job. I really, really enjoy it. You just have to learn to deal with it. I mean, we do have a support group that helps our dispatchers if you've taken a really bad call. Sometimes you just have to step away for a few minutes, take a break, and then come back. But it can be stressful, but it also is very rewarding.
Let's go out to Worcester County. This is Ray. Ray, thanks for the call. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm calling concerning when we make a 911 call in Ocean City, it does not go to Ocean City, it goes to Snow Hill, which results in the delay.
Okay, Ray, we're having a little trouble with your phone, but I think I heard him say the calls to Ocean City wind up going to Snow Hill, the county seat. And maybe that's a cell situation as well.
Could be. It could be. I had trouble understanding what he says, but it sounds like what it might be.
Yeah. Where's the technology heading here? I mean, I guess the GPS is a big step forward.
Yeah, we do have mapping. So when you dial 911, if you're calling from a landline, it populates on our GPS map so we can see your location. If you're calling, like from a cell phone, it does give us the cell tower address, and it also pings and gives us a location within so many meters of where you're actually located when you do call.
And in some cases of critical infrastructure too, some of the mapping software are actually giving first responders a blueprint look at the buildings, dwellings, homes, and communities that they're responding to. Hydranted areas as well as ponds and water sources are all being mapped out. All this becomes populated on a screen so that dispatcher can tell the police officer his closest backup unit or tell the fire truck his closest source of water for a fire call. It's all being mapped out and moving, all next-gen technology moving forward.
What's the latest on getting all of the police and fire and EMS radios to talk to each other? I mean, that is a long-standing issue.
You asked me the most exciting question of the night because we are, in 2 days, Harford County goes completely countywide radio interoperability. For the last 7 to 9 years, we've been putting together a multi-million-dollar system on the 700, 800 megahertz frequencies that will allow an animal control warden in the northern end of the county to actually talk to the county exec in the southern end of the county, and police officers and firefighters and DPW workers to all connect. So this goes live 7 a.m. this Wednesday morning for Harford County.
Good luck. I mean, because we just heard about the smoke incident in the Washington Metro, where the Metro police couldn't talk to DC Fire, and it's different when you're down in a tunnel, I guess.
We are extremely excited because not only does this give us the ability within the county to do this, but we can patch into our mutual aid counties with similar radio technology. No longer will we have to for the fire truck to call the dispatcher, to call the police, to talk to him. They can go right to one another directly, and it's been a long time coming. Very excited about the program.
Anne Arundel County, this is Christopher. Christopher, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Yes, I have a question about cell phones. Most cell phones I see these days have a little icon to dial 911 just with a touch. I know that there are a lot of inadvertent phone calls when people touch the phone or sit on the phone and unintentionally dial someone. Do you get a lot of 911 calls from that?
Great question. And what should somebody do if they think they may have just called by mistake?
We do get a lot of accidental calls. We call them pocket dials. It's generally what happens. We ask you to stay on the line if you do realize that you've made that type of call. That way we don't have to call you back. Because every 911 call that comes in that's not answered, or we have no voice contact, we have to challenge that first to make sure it's not a TDY call, which would be a deaf or hard of hearing caller. And then if we don't get any response back, then we assume that there may be an emergency. And if it's a landline and we have an address, we will send a police officer out to verify that you do or do not have an emergency. But we, from cell phones, we do get a lot of the pocket dials, and we have to call every single one back.
It helps us too, because sometimes if people don't know and that's their emergency, that's the way that they call and summons us. So we have to verify everyone. Last year, Jeff, in addition to the 234,000 incoming calls, we actually called back 101,000 people with follow-up calls, anywhere from automatic dials, pocket dials, as Rhonda described, things like that. So we're required to verify and validate everyone.
Is it true that that old 5-year-old cell phone that's not currently active can still make a 911 call?
Yeah, if it has a good battery, it can still dial 911. It doesn't have to have a service. You don't have to have a provider or be paying the bill. As long as the cell phone has a battery, most of them will dial 911. So you can still use it in an emergency, but giving it to a child to play with because they like having a cell phone, just take the battery out. We do get a lot of children playing with the cell phone, especially when you're traveling down the road and you've got a fussy child in the back. You hand them your cell phone because they like to play with it. Then their thumbs can hit the button or that emergency button that the previous caller talked about. They push and hold that, and it automatically dials 911.
Wow. The educational outreach that you do, where you're talking to kids and you have tour groups in, tell me about that, and what sort of questions do you get from kids?
The questions that we get from the children range from everything to, what do I do if somebody breaks into my house? A lot of the questions I get are what-if questions, because they watch a lot of TV, so they're pretty far out there sometimes. But we do the best we can to answer their questions. We also encourage them to talk to their parents about what to do if you have an emergency and how to handle it in your situation, because we can't give them the answers to everything. They still have to have a plan, work it out with their parents, and know what to do for their home life.
You ever gotten a call from a youngster? I mean, you hear about those situations in the news where a kid who's had a tour like that or had a presentation like yours heroically calls 911 in some situation.
We do get children who call 911. They actually do a very good job when they call, because they follow our directions. They give us the information that we need. Most times they don't understand the seriousness of the call, so they're not as afraid as an adult would be. So they do very well with us. We do have a Gold 911 program. So when a child dials 911 in Harford County, and they do a really good job, if the 911 operator feels that it's warranted, they nominate them for the Gold 911 award. We review the case, check with the parents, get their permission. Generally, we go to the school, do an assembly, give them a Gold 911 pin. They get a proclamation from the county. They get certificates. And we try to make it a pretty big deal. We also use it as an educational tool, so we can teach all their friends that 911 is very important and not to play with the phone, because somebody could be having a real emergency.
Right. How does the prioritizing of calls work? If somebody in the same geographic part of the county calls in with a burglary in progress and somebody else has something less serious, who makes the call and what goes first?
The call taker. If you're taking a call and maybe you're just taking a dog barking complaint, which is not a very serious call. If we're getting a lot of incoming calls, you can put that caller on hold or hang out quickly with them, get the basic information, and then go on to the next call, which may be a higher priority.
I don't know how you feel about it, but when there's a big news story and some tragic situation, and a couple days later the 911 tapes are released to the media, and it's another round of headlines. And I mean, I'm in the media. I love to have access to stuff, but frankly, I don't necessarily want to hear it. And you're sort of hearing somebody at their worst moment. I've never quite felt right about that.
It is difficult, and as Rhonda said, it's very, very stressful, because you have to keep a very calm demeanor while this person's life is falling apart around them. And you have to have a conversation with them that's very candid and very, very calming, but also very candid, very forthright, because we need to get the information from them. It is distressing at times and very stressful on the dispatchers.
Eddie Hopkins, Rhonda Hinch of Harford County Emergency Services, kind of you to stop by.
Enjoyed it. Thank you, Jeff, for having us.
Good luck with the new radios and the new call center.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for Direct Connection tonight. We are back Thursday at this time with Your Money and Business. And then join us again for State Circle and the latest on Maryland politics. That's Friday at 7:30. Now, for all of us here at MPT, I'm Jeff Salkin. Thanks for watching and have a good night.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.